Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Way to Wow Bounce Back. If you were with us last week, you had a chance to hear me interviewing my lovely husband, Rabbi Leah Stiegel, and his journey in sobriety and finding his place in Judaism as a rabbi. If you missed it, you can still see the recording on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Way to Wow. Well, today we have a very special guest, and I feel honored to have Mike Skripnik with us all the way from Calgary, Alberta, and we're out in California. I want to also take a quick moment and thank our producer, Rabbi Kevin Bemel, for making this possible and taking care of all the technical stuff for us. And today we're going to get to hear a powerful story, a journey of a man who for years didn't have a voice, suppressed things that were traumatic. And his journey in finding not just a way of survival, but a way of thriving and a way of giving back, making a difference. Now, Mike is now a keynote speaker. He's a host of a podcast. He's an 8-time international bestseller. He's actually almost done with his 9th book. And I'm so excited for you to hear his personal story. There's so much to unpack here, so much to learn. I would say if you're a man in this world feeling like you need some guidance, you don't want to miss this. And women, you need to hear this too, because if you have a man in your life, how much more love and support can you give when you hear this man's story? So I'm going to start with welcoming you, Mike. Thank you for taking time to come onto this show. I know that you travel and many people fly you out to speak, and you're a coach to many people. You have a background in finance, which is so cool because that's my world right now. But why don't we start with you sharing a little bit about some of the early challenges you faced? Take us back as far as you want. You know, this is your story, and your story matters. So some of the challenges you faced and how you realize you need to take a closer look at it in a different way.
Yeah, Leah, I really appreciate it. I appreciate having the opportunity to share. I've enjoyed our interactions thus far, and what better than just go live and talk about it, right? For me, I don't know how, maybe we'll go back further. Maybe we'll just start where, I had a point of crisis. I think that, I think anyone who would want to raise their hands and really agree that the pandemic was hard. 2 years. And in a lot of cases for people, they managed to somehow navigate, and some had the best years of their lives. And for some, like me, my business basically evaporated. I was speaking and doing workshops. That disappears pretty quickly. And then you spend a whole pile of time trying to navigate the waters. And, I don't know about an old dog, but this old dog had a little bit of trouble in the digital tricks world. And figuring out and reinventing and in a landscape and industry that was constantly changing every couple of months, combine that frustration with, boy, this was really working. I can't figure this out, with the isolation and the life in Zoom and everything that comes with it. And then starts to create this lack of predictability of your business, all led to kind of the moment last September. So what had been 18 months in to the pandemic, that was just one of those moments where I've had plenty in the past where a business thing just kind of didn't work out. You're like, we're going different directions and it's not what we thought it was going to be. And I've always been able to move on. And clearly the pressure of all of the past year and a half at that point, took me down, and I took it hard or whatever it was. I spiraled quickly, deeply into a dark depression. And it was astonishing to me how deep. And I felt hopeless. I felt worthless. I didn't have a clue what the future held. And for one moment in my life, I felt my troubles were so insurmountable that suicide would be the number one way to escape and give my family, here's the terrible way of thinking, my family would be better off. And for me, that seemed real and a real possibility. And clearly that was not a result. And I did not end up throwing myself into the raging river that I kept walking by every day thinking that that might be an idea. And within 10 days, I finally reached out for help. 10 of the darkest days of my entire life, quite frankly, from a mental health standpoint. I don't know how I got there, and I didn't know how to get out. I reached out to a professional I knew, and she threw me the lifeline. She said, "Yes, I'm available. We'll talk immediately." And from that moment, I kind of clawed back, up the shores of the bank, if you will, and to a pathway to healing. And so that was kind of the moment for me that just culminated, I don't know, years of frustration or not fitting, but there's so much more to it. And I know we're going to get into it, but that was the moment for me that shifted everything.
Thank you for sharing that. That's not an easy thing to say out loud, especially in this setting. What was it like for the people around you before you reached out for help in those 10 days, your darkest days? Tell us more if you can, if you recall, or maybe you don't because you were really in a dark place alone, feeling alone. What was it like for your wife? I know you're a dad. Were they aware of how much and how close you were to taking your life?
Well, we're a real close family. And our son had just gotten back he's a downhill mountain bike racer. He got back from World Cup and was starting his last semester of school. And so he was occupied with all kinds of emotion. Our daughter was trying to find her way in her film industry business. And my wife, we don't live in Calgary, Alberta right now. That's where I'm from.
Oh, I apologize.
It's quite all right.
Advertising.
We relocated to Squamish, British Columbia 4 years ago.
Sorry,
and it's that's quite all right. It's between Vancouver and Whistler.
Yes.
And my wife, and my wife works at the Lululemon. She picked up a role there, and she just loves the culture. And it's a terrible commute in bad weather, and absolutely glorious otherwise. And so she would leave every day, and they all saw me in this moment of darkness that they had never witnessed. They have never seen me in this state. And she literally wondered each day as she drove home. Makes me a little emotional, but she wondered if I would be there. And they all wondered. And they know I needed to get out and do a walk and be out of the house, but they were all frightened or concerned that I may not come back. And that I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that was their thinking. But as the healing started to begin, those disclosures happened. And, even now it's just so hard to imagine that that's what my wife, and she's trying to be this support person. She didn't understand the gravity of my circumstances at the moment and what, our financial situation, like everything, what it all meant. But she was just slugging it out, trying to, do well for our family and be there to support. And, she's coming home thinking I wouldn't be alive when she got there. So
I can't even imagine for as an entire family, everyone's experiencing it and viewing it through their lenses, and their experiences is unique, but you're the one in the middle of it all. And I'm sure that also brought guilt with it. Like, I'm feeling all these things, but I'm also feeling guilty that I'm feeling all these things because everyone's relying on me and they love me so much. And that's where I think that thought will enter your mind. They're better off without me, because you feel bad that this is the man that they have right now. But you found hope. You found, and you did some self-discovery. Share with us what you can about what you learned.
Yeah, I will. And, I did some great insurance planning a long time ago. So the logic was really like, they'd really be better off. But no,
I'm in that world, so I completely understand that.
Yeah, there was no way I could do it. Number one, I couldn't have forced my family into that, dealing with that they didn't need a life reset. I was going through one. They didn't need it, right? They didn't need their lives in upheaval. And the other worry I had was, what if I survived? That would really suck. The trauma, the pain, like,
because you had a plan.
I couldn't have lived with myself if I survived trying to kill myself. Go figure.
Right.
All right.
No,
So
I get that. You mentioned you had a thought about jumping in the river. Was that a
yeah, we were having big storms and rain, and the river was just raging, and it looked unsurvivable. I stepped out of that moment after I reached for that lifeline, and just a beautiful woman who is part of my life, who is a professional and a psychologist, a PhD, she really just extended that. And it brought me on a journey. And so the next journey was find a professional who did post-traumatic stress treatment. And there's a reason for this. And I found a fellow who's local, who really, really is an expert. And the reason I had that as my next step was because I had to deal with, one of the things about the pandemic was every few months you're like, how did I get myself in this situation? Why did it change? Why am I repeating? And everything was amplified, but that was my life. There were 5-year, 3-year, 10-year windows where I would rise in success and then suddenly somehow find myself limited. And it felt like those patterns just kept playing out. I couldn't put my finger on, I have no idea what this all meant, but the pattern over and over again, just like, why is the person I just started working with, why are they a crook? Or why do they do something wrong? Or why am I in a transition? Like, what is going on here? And I had to look at what causes the patterns. And, I said, well, there's only one thing that's on my mind every single day. And that is trauma that I experienced as a child. And the trauma I experienced as a child is I was sexually abused by a pillar of the community at 11 years old. And it was a couple of incidents, and, we curtailed it right away, but no one knew why. I never interacted anymore in that way. But what I learned and the patterns that get set. And so abuse happens, we break our legs too. And that's kind of this physical abuse. So I'm not going to equate the actual abuse with anything other than it set a pattern. And what it does to a child's brain when you're traumatized at a young age is it hardwires your neural pathways to avoid the problem ever again and never protect yourself. And so at 11, I learned that the best possible man in the community's perception was the person I could trust the least.
Wow. Whoa.
And so that gets wired in, right? So every action I take for the rest of my life until that changes was to prevent myself from being close to men who are good, or at least perceptively good. So what I end up doing is bringing in flawed men that I could visually see their flaws in business, because it was safe, because I could see it. Like, there's the problem. I can navigate this world. And the reality was, of course, a flawed person who shows you their stripes is usually deeply flawed, right? And so I had always a surprise at the end of that road, And so that created this cycle of business. And one thing that I'd have to say is I have a wonderful mother, wonderful sister, and I always had incredible women in my life. And so on the relationship side, that's where my love was. That's where my safety was. And that's where my security was. So going back to my wife and our relationship was always a safe place. So my biggest challenge was in my professional side. And the truth is no one could tell. There's not one person on the outside who would go, there's something going on, because I by all means, I had a success. I was rising every time. There were some coincidental weird things that go on in business over time. I was in the investment markets, so you kind of live and die by sometimes the market cycles. So no one thought anything different. They didn't think it was something I was doing, and I didn't think it was something I was doing. I just thought it was external. But now going through this journey, I figured it out. And so the key is how do I never repeat that moment again in life that brought me into darkness? And how do I fix the thing that causes the problem in the first place? And so that's what I got to work on. And I started to work with a therapist who does EMDR.
Before we get to that, because that's a really hot topic, can I ask you a question about the workplace and something you mentioned? You mentioned that any man that was perceived to be the best by most people, who was the good guy for most people, to you, that was the unsafe territory. Yes. How did that affect any business that you were in? And was that something that he, as an individual, was able to tell that you felt unsafe with him, or that there was tension or conflict, or you carried it all? did it play outward?
So as a teenager, from the moment of abuse to 19 years old, I blocked it all out. So I didn't even remember that had happened. So what I saw with music teachers, with coaches in sport, with teachers in general, is if they weren't women, the good men, I always had conflict. When I should have been the MVP, I wasn't. When I should have been selected as the captain, I wasn't. And the reason is there was something. And it was the energy that I had that protected myself from engaging and being engaged by good men who I perceived to be dangerous, that had ulterior motives. In business, then I became more conscious around 19. I actually tragically went to a counselor to ask for help. And they said, well, we can't do anything about the man that abused you. It's too long ago. And by the way, good luck with that.
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So I set off going, I guess I got to deal with this.
It's almost like it happened again. When someone does that to you, it's like it just happened fresh.
Yeah, and I didn't even feel the rejection. I felt sad that I couldn't take the man off the street because there's so much guilt that I live with that, this man went on to abuse a lot more boys than me. And so there was a lot of guilt in that. But the real tragedy was that I thought I could solve it myself. And I just went on doing it. And I was always driving forward, and I had some really great successes and, out of university and in my businesses. And so it always felt like I had a handle on it. And then it was the men that I chose to work with. I was attracted to hard driving men who were absolutely amazing, exciting entrepreneurs, thinking outside the box, but with flaws. And often with flaws that everyone else in the marketplace knew and would say, and I go, no, you don't know them. They're good. And then I would see them, the red flags start coming up, and I'm like, I can mitigate it. I'm a smart guy. I'm nimble. I got this. And I didn't have it. And so every few years, their faults would ultimately lead to my demise because I was so close. There was shrapnel flying everywhere, right? And eventually what happened by 2010, when I finally made a huge shift in my business in a good way, I just stopped working with men altogether that I didn't pay as my coaches or mentors. So I just stopped choosing to do business with bad men or men in general. I just thought, okay, well, that's safe. I'll just go alone. Alone is a nice way to become very isolated.
Very isolated, and we need others. Yeah. Speaking of needing others and that we can't do any of the real work alone, tell me your journey to finding EMDR and deciding that that's what you're going to try, because there's so many different types of therapies, of healing patterns. It's interesting when you shared with me about that. We're going to talk about what EMDR is, but it's no coincidence that I myself just got introduced to it to heal from some of my own past traumas. And I had literally just committed to it. And then I get the email and I read that saved your life. And I was blown away.
Yeah.
And so share with us first, let's tell the audience, what is EMDR? How did you decide, yes, I'll try that? And then of course we want to hear how it saved you.
Okay. So I experimented. My gateway experiment was a number of years earlier. I was in a frustrated part of my life. Clearly all of the other stuff was the reason. It was about injustice. And so on the roads, it just seemed the more I was driving, the more people were doing things that they shouldn't to me. And it all felt personal. And so I was just going bonkers. I just wanted to kill people on the road. And I was losing my stuff. And so I sought help from this lady that I reached out to first, and she did EMDR with me. She introduced it. She goes, I think I can get this, I can help you. And it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's what EMDR stands for. And it's really a bilateral stimulation that occurs while going through a psychoanalysis or a therapy session. And Diana brought me through this one session, which, I'll admit, it was weird. I think it's weird. I think the whole thing of watching, it was just weird. Uh, but it worked instantly. The cause of why I felt the injustice, the causal parts, the part that create anxiety and anger and the emotion completely disappeared. And so now I could use the skills and the tools and the strategies that you deal with, thinking negative or bad thoughts. You can go, okay, this is where I'm going to put it. This is the technique. Right. So now I didn't have the anger, and the anger just clouds all your good judgment. Right. And so I got rid of that, and I was able to process.
When you say it worked, like, what are we talking about? 1 session, 10 sessions?
Well, for that instant, it was instant. It was 1 session.
Wow.
And so fast forward to this experience and going through, so I knew I needed some kind of trauma help, and EMDR was definitely there. And one of my clients that I helped write a book had experienced incredible trauma in his life, and he was a helicopter pilot. So he crashed in a helicopter and lived, and he was one of the handful of few people who lived while a few of his friends died back in 1992. It was just in a snowboarding thing on the top of a mountain, and he was a pilot himself, and he was starting to panic at 100 feet above the ground. Just before he was landing his helicopter, he would flip out, and that's not really helpful in trying to land planes or helicopters. And so he told me that he'd sought help from an EMDR specialist, and he was just cured. It's just like it worked like crazy, and he was an advocate. And so that conversation combined with my experience led me to seek out someone locally who I just had a hunch might be the same guy. I don't even think they are actually the same therapist.
Okay.
And he struck a chord with me in his approach. And our first conversation early in October was magical. We did a little therapy right there and then, and we did a little discussing. And that was the moment that I said, okay, it's time to bring my secret from where it was in the recesses of mine to everybody. My wife was the only person who knew pretty much at that point. And so it was time to tell my family, tell everybody around me. And then we had about 8 weeks between our next sessions because I just financially had to figure it out. He's not an inexpensive investment, but an investment worth it. And really, it was the fact that he was, and I could have gone to my friend, right? But I needed a man who was good, who was helpful. I needed that as much as I needed the treatment.
For sure.
And I recently I've given a talk about the tools and the craftsmen or the people who use them, and the right combination. A 25-year-old woman out of college who applied to EMDR would not have had the same impact as a parent, a man in his late 30s, early 40s, who did it at the same time. So he, as a craftsman, was just as good combined with the therapy.
Yeah, and I think it's no accident that it had to be a man, because you're healing from trauma that has to do with a man, and now you're building a beautiful experience and trust with a man who's good at his craft. Like it is designed that way for you to have that healing process. If it were the other way around and you had trauma with women, one could argue, yeah, an EMDR through a woman would be an incredible thing for you to experience. That's why I'm so impressed with your openness, and it's magical that happened. And it's like it comes full circle, I feel.
Yeah, it is. Like there wasn't a single day from the moment I went into my depression in September until, just outside of the last treatment I had in December, where I didn't cry. Like I cried at some point in a day, every day for 2.5 months. The last crying, and now I cry a little differently, but I'm really like on an edge of crying all the time, but in a good way now, finally. It's amazing that we went through intense 2-hour sessions for 2 weeks straight. And normally he would do it in a weekend. It just didn't work through Zoom and our scheduling.
Wait, 2 weeks straight, meaning every day for 2 weeks?
Every weekday for 2 weeks. I was spent 2 hours going through
That's 20 hours,
very intense
20 hours
theory.
of intense EMDR.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
incredible.
And by midway through, I felt again, instantaneous, I call it a miracle, a miraculous shift. It was, in movies, I don't know, these Avenger movies and stuff where the ground shakes and then the video gets fuzzy and then it's all peaceful.
Static.
Nothing changes, but everything changed. That's precisely how it felt for me. In that there was this moment where I realized that my life was now different. And not only that, it was the way it should have been for 40 years and never was. All the limitations that were created because of these patterns, all the personal, emotional definitions I had of my life with shame and guilt, worthlessness and hopelessness that I hid, secrets. I mean, there wasn't a day from the time I was 19 till, today that I didn't think of being sexually abused. There wasn't a day that went by. I think it's if someone had someone loved one die, there's not a day that goes by you don't think of the loved one. For me, there wasn't a day I didn't get reminded. And in the last decade, there's so many media reminders of this going on, especially with women, and being between priests and gymnastics coaches and you name it. The key for me is EMDR took away the emotion, the anxiety, the absolute angst that came with all the emotions that were connected to that. And I was able to think about it in a different way. And I was able to see the possibilities in a different way. And what really was amazing, and I think I explained this to you before, Leah, is I was talking about we got kind of, what do we get? Really nerdy, real genius style nerdy on quantum physics the other day.
Yes.
And I think of it in that way though. And what I really try to explain it is, for my life, for 40 years, I was smashing particles together, thinking that what mattered was the matter, the physical stuff, at a subatomic level. That's not what matters. That's what keeps people away. That keeps particles away from you. So you just butt up, right? How you get people in your life, how you open up opportunities is connecting in the space between, which is the most of it anyways. We're more space than anything, not particles. And EMDR and the removal of all of that neural pathway patterns and emotions opened up the space. And so ever since, early December, I've been operating at a different level. I've been operating in this place where space interacts, where people immediately reach out to me out of the blue because they need to share something, need to talk to me. The people I connect with immediately after never having met them, we go deep right away. And all conversations now are meaningful. You can always step back and talk about the weather, but going deep, I think and hey, I'm 52 in a week and I don't have time to waste. I want to make some precious hay while the time is good. And, I don't have time to waste on anything that's not meaningful. So going there all the time with incredible, good men. And that's been an absolute joy for me.
Mike, we're going to pivot in a minute or two to what you're doing with your newfound self, because you're giving back in such an incredible way. But I have to go back a minute when you said out of the blue, I'll get a call. I don't think it was so out of the blue. I think everything is designed in such a miraculous way. We could say the same about how you and I connected through Kevin. Out of the blue, I told him I had a cancellation. A friend of mine couldn't make it to today's show. You and I were going to meet yesterday anyway to have you come to a show down the road. And then out of the blue, I read your bio and I am blown away because you came into my life at the right time. You're providing hope for men all day long. You probably had no idea that the person who's going to be interviewing you needed to hear your message for herself. Mm-hmm. There's so much out there that we don't know what people struggle with and the painful things that they're trying to heal from. And, I'm a major component of, therapy, investing in yourself and seeking professional help when needed. And, I've been through a divorce and I've been through a lot of things. but there's always new content that needs to be worked on and unpacked and looked at and to be the best self in this moment. And when I hear your story, I think hope, because a lot of us do feel like, well, that I'll always just have that problem, or that's just who I am. And that, take it or leave it, people. That's my trigger. That's my thing. But what if it doesn't have to stay that way? And part of the EMDR I'm learning is, trying to get, like, we're on a scale of 0 to 7, 0 being you're not really triggered and 7 being it's intense. Like, if you're at a 7, we try and get down to a 0. So we're not emotionally charged by that same, whatever it is you're working on, right? To know that you were able to get to that 0 level. And I'm not sure if you did that type of therapy that I'm referring to, but I can't imagine that that's a real thing, because sometimes it's so ingrained and so heavy. But you provide hope, if not just for men, just so you know, there are women who are going to be inspired to seek help if they're feeling that type of, despair to the point of that darkness, someone going through their 10 days, right? If ever it leads to that. But it's just remarkable that now you can turn around, you're helping the world at large. Seriously, your live stream, you are doing podcasts, you're writing books, you're speaking, you're being flown out to share your wisdom. I know that you created a couple things that we want to share with the world. One of them is this, you're launching the Unlimited Worth Project. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or a lot about that?
I do. And I love something you said, highlighting the out of the blue. I know that being open to the universe, having my energy attract the space in between, everybody who's open will connect, right? When I say out of the blue is for 40 years, that would never have happened.
Right.
Not in that way. Right. And not that it isn't absolutely profoundly correct, that it's not really accidental. However, the 40 years, there was always a limit. But what about, and I live with that limit, knowing that I was never at my full potential. Never being able to work with people who couldn't quite put their finger on why they didn't work with me, or why we didn't reach that new level of success. So, fast forward to where I am on the other side of treatment, and that is the biggest fear was revealing my secret, and that I would look at people square in the eye, and I'm thinking to myself, but you don't know my story. And what I was worried about is my mom would learn that she couldn't protect me. Well, of course she couldn't protect me. She didn't know. She didn't throw me in the hands of a lion. She just loved me and hoped she was doing the right thing for me. Right. My wife didn't know better. She just thought I was okay. So no one did anything to me. I wasn't guilty or responsible for the actions of a person after the fact. And so once I was able to relieve myself of all of that burden, all of that guilt, all that shame, and walk through the door and step over that, the oath of silence I took to never tell my story. I mean, I would have been perfectly happy never to talk about it in my life. Like I really would have. But on the other side, that was the only thing that I should have done from the very minute I realized I had that. I should have dealt with it, and I should have been persistent, and someone else should have said, you gotta go get some help, And so I'm fairly militant right now about a man who says, yeah, that was the thing, but I think I've got it. You don't have it. You've never fixed it. You won't fix it by yourself. A professional is required. And, that's the mission I'm on right now, because I know the other side of the door is brilliant, and it's not brilliant at some time. It's not some kind of long healing journey. There's stuff that still needs to be worked out, but it's immediate. You get your secret out, you share, break your silence, step into the light, open the door on the other side after treatment, and you're instantly better. Your life is not going to improve overnight because there's stuff, right? But your life mentally and where you fit in this world will improve immediately. Wow. It's just, I always was pretty proud of myself for engaging people, drawing out personal information from them, to get them to share. And so I can learn about them, right? And I can help them, because that's always been my role, is to serve. Yet I was really good at pretending that I was sharing everything. I didn't do it consciously, but I know that I never gave everybody everything. And now I don't have to give everybody that secret of abuse, but there's nothing worth hiding. Like, we all have our misgivings in life, and those are always secrets worth keeping. But that's the core secret, is I was damaged and I had a pattern set that dictated my life, and I didn't have any control. I didn't have free will. My brain was wired a certain way to behave a certain way to protect that child. And unfortunately, that protection is not congruent with regular, normal people. And so I finally realized what it's like to not have had trauma, And so for me, I view it rather normalized. Like, it's a sensational story. It was the worst place I've ever been. There's incredible highs too that are now coming. But the real story is, it's, as a matter of fact, a man who looks successful, 1 in 6 of those people is not doing well, right? And 1 in 6 is sexual abuse, let alone all kinds of other traumas, right?
Right.
So we've got a man who looks good, they're looking like they're successful, and they're dying inside every day. It takes 24 years for a man to reveal their abuse. Okay, so you're walking around with 30 to 40-year-olds who are on the rise, and some of those people are suffering. And I don't want those people to suffer till they're 50. I don't want to, it just kills you. It just eats you alive, and it will bring everybody with you, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm on a mission right now to tell the world. And I guess the simple goal is, how do I affect 1 million men and their families? I know something. I know what the other side of the door looks like. How do I tell everyone? So I started interviewing men who are good men, who have healed and had therapy. I don't interview the men that I'm not a therapist, so that's not my job. But my role is to get what is really good about that experience out of men who've gone through it. And I interview them, and I'm building the book. And so over the last few months, I've been doing that. And so, a book is going to reach a ton of people. That's a good way to get a word out. A podcast, then I can reach.
Are you interviewing them on the podcast? Is that the platform?
Yeah, Unlimited Worth will be interviewing men who have gone through both sides. They have to be healed. Because I want to bring hope. It's matter of fact, like, today you're bad, tomorrow you're 100% better, exponentially better. And every single man will attest to, when they went through a healing journey, they were better almost instantaneously. Life got better. And even if their life sucked, it sucked way less.
Now, do they have
if everything is falling apart, you're not going to immediately, if you just lost your house and your car, and they don't show up the next day, but your attitude towards it and your ability to quickly regain everything completely is there.
Well, how does one know that they actually healed? Because, Mike, you're going to ask them a series of questions to find out if they're really good for the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. So is there a certain way that they're on the other side? Do they have to have gone through EMDR, or
yes.
Do they? Okay. So
simple.
This is
childhood trauma must have gone through therapy and EMDR.
This is really powerful. I think we need to repeat what you said, because there could be people coming to you. I was one of those people. I spent thousands of dollars a year on, seeing a therapist 2 hours at a time, right? Years. I could say, I was healed, right? So how does one know that, okay, this is how we know you have
you
zero
can't do it
secrets,
on your own.
Zero secrets. Right. You went through EMDR, your life is out there on the wall, to tell me what that looks like.
I want you to jump off rocks and you had a broken leg.
Oh, we just had a great part. I think you froze.
If you didn't see a doctor and have right? So so I asked somebody to jump off a rock's face with me onto the ground 10 feet below. And I know you have broken leg. If you went to see a doctor and you have a cast and you had proper treatment 6 or 8 weeks ago, you're probably fine. But if you didn't do all that, your leg would
Ah.
snap, right? The same as with your brain. And so I'm not a therapist. And I will tell any man who hasn't had treatment, go get it. But I want to give them the hope and the clarity that it really is no big deal, because successful men who are really, really good are talking in my interviews and will be talking on my podcast and are part of the book and part of my platform, that they can attest to how good it is on the other side, and how
Amazing.
easy that everything you feared, everything that defined you, on the other side no longer does. I talk about this in my book. There are patterns, right?
Yeah.
We are stuck in our patterns, and then we get emotional because of these patterns, right? The shame and the guilt and all that is like, how do we keep reliving it? Well, I'm going to get more guilty, more shame, more hopelessness, and it just compounds. When you're on the other side of it, how do you know you're well? Is you don't have patterns that dictate your life anymore in a negative way, number one.
Sounds so freeing.
And the emotions aren't linked to anything.
Yeah.
They're unconditional. Trust is one of the hardest. You trust yourself. And it doesn't matter what other people, if you're not in a life or death where someone's threatening your life, you trust yourself. What everyone else does, they're going to do. And it may affect your life, but it isn't going to affect you. And so knowing that, it just changes. It changes how I operate every day. Doesn't mean I'm not concerned about the bills and where I'm going and, how do people like me? That's not the case. I know that I'll be fine. I know I'll be fine. And I know I'm loved. I never, you worry that if you share that story, like if you bring that crap into the open, people are going to think twice. That's wrong. People love you more.
That's very powerful. It's true. A lot of people feel that they're blemished or they're scarred for life, or if I share this, what are they going to think about me? Will they ever look at me the same? And no, they won't look at you the same. They'll probably admire you more for being so brave. I mean, you're inspiring men to take action. And, we live in a society where it's weak for men to cry. It's weak for men to talk about feelings. And now I think we're getting a lot kinder. And, I don't say we like me. I always, I love men who cry. What I mean by that is they're in touch with what's going on, right? They're aware of their experiences and how it affects them. Vulnerability is attractive. And women need that and like that. And that's how you thrive in a relationship. But the world was set up that men are tough and women are the dainty, weaker ones. And it's in the movies, it's in the ads, it's getting a little better, but Hollywood doesn't help that, where the men, we cry to our husbands. Well, husbands can cry to their wives. We're allowed to complain about a bad day, and it doesn't just mean that the women are fetching. So
Can I share something with you?
Please.
Yeah. And we're just lining up. I want to speak on 100 stages over the next year. Because I think
that's
a
million men, 100 stages.
Yeah. I mean, how else am I going to reach a million men? I gotta be out there. So any platform that can give me that reach, I'm going for. And so if I'm on stages, back out speaking, there is no way I'm not going to get emotional. But I want to share the emotion. I was crying every day for 2.5 months in a depressed mode, not feeling, I'm just tortured. I was getting better, but I was still. Today I cry or I get emotional as I tell my story, not because of the pain of my story, not because of the old feelings that we're all connected to everything. But I tell the story and I get emotional when I hear it resonates. I hear two things. One is, I'm so sorry it happened to you. And I appreciate the empathy. That is one of those, I feel loved and I can receive it. And how I receive it is by being emotional, because I know it touches. The other thing is, I have a secret too. And when I know it, my radar is pretty good now. I'll tell you, there's not an audience or a room I won't go into that I know that something's not going on, because I've seen it, I lived it, and I'm conscious and aware now. And so that emotion, if I'm in a room with 1,000 people and I see one person who connects with me and I go, boy, that person is living in their torment, that's going to make me cry. So I'm going to have 100 stage cries probably, which is fine.
You know what
That,
you're doing for
that's
yourself?
all
That's
right.
such a gift.
What's
This
that?
image came to me. Mike, as an 11-year-old boy, who not only didn't allow himself to acknowledge what happened, couldn't have someone give him that empathy of, I'm sorry that happened to you. That was not on anyone's radar because it was a secret. You are giving yourself the gift of what that 11-year-old boy did not have.
And I was surrounded by a family who just absolutely like was just overflowing in that ability. They all could have given it to me from the very moment. Like that's I have a family now that is that way. And when I revealed my secret and broke my silence, my mom and my dad rose. My sister rose to the occasion. They were exactly the people they always were that I never received because I didn't give it to them. And then our kids, like our 18, soon to be 18 and 20-year-old, 21-year-old adult kids who've been living in pandemic life in our house together for a long time, they rose to the occasion and said, we've got your back and we love you. We've got your back and we love you. My wife said, I've got your back. Be well. And they rallied around and said, the only thing you should focus on is being well. And I was worried about getting work and being accepted professionally. And what am I going to do next? And reinventing myself once again. And all my family said, we got your back. You get well. We'll take care of this. And for the first time in my life, I completely let go of the reins and allowed myself to heal. And that's pretty overwhelming. It's a big deal.
I feel so honored to hear this story from you, not just reading it, which I will, but every tear that you shed needs to come out. It's part of, since you're 11 years old, every amount of support and love you get, you deserve, and it was owed to you. And now you're getting it at soon 52 years old. And it's a great birthday gift to give yourself the allowing and embracing the support, the empathy, not the pity. It's a different kind of feeling. It's validation to you matter. That should not have happened. It's not okay. And we love you. And we're sorry you went through that. And we're sorry you didn't talk about it sooner. It's your time. But you see, one of the things I do believe, and that's just my belief, is that when we go through things that are extremely painful and traumatic, there's a time in which there's this kind of pivot to, it's not about me now, and it's about, I can help the next person who's going through the same thing. That the lessons I've learned along the way, I actually owe to the universe to share and give back and help the next person. You're doing that in such an incredible way. You know, when I think about some of the things I've had to overcome, when I think that I can help one person because I can say I've been there, let me show you how to get through it. It kind of made it worth it. Not that I want it to happen again, but that lesson alone brought me here to be able to be that pillar for somebody else. Do you feel similar to that? Is that something you've ever experienced?
I do. I certainly feel that I am well armed for this battle. I feel, my professional life, my personal family, and just relationship support over the years, I think a lot of things are aligned to allow me to be a voice for this. I'm not a crusader in the way that, I'm not here to sensationalize, the Catholic Church's, I don't, that's not where I'm coming from in this. And I hope that everyone begins to understand that it's not about the sensationalization of the moment, the abuse, all this other. What it really means is a heartfelt desire to get inside the lives of people who deserve that empathy, deserve that healing, so that they can be better, so that they can like, I call it unlimited worth for a reason, because I lived worthless and I felt like I was limited. And now I feel unlimited and I know I have worth. And
So powerful.
everybody who doesn't feel that should feel it inherently. It should just be people who haven't had trauma. They just know that.
Right. It's a born right.
They just know this stuff, right? It's just, I'm the outlier, not them. And they know that they're worth it and they live that way. And it's an afterthought. It's not even a thought, but now it's a conscious thought for me. And the unconscious stuff is that everyone's coming into the space. And why doesn't everybody deserve to be there? Why don't they deserve to receive and give love, to be happy without an asterisk? Why don't they deserve calm in life and in relationships? And, those things are just elements that it's not a crusade. It's just get well, see a professional. Let's be honest about where we were, and don't use the insurmountable pressure as the way you get help. Like, I didn't need to do that. Right. I didn't need to go through a suicide moment to figure that out. Someone could have said, I don't think you're well. I see some patterns. And if I resonate, you should probably take heed and go get help too. If that's it, I think it's brilliant. Like, it's a generational, it will pass on through families, wives, husbands, sisters, children, brothers, mothers, and their kids. Like, my kids are better off because I'm here now doing this.
Wow. I want to wrap up in a couple minutes and actually open it up for questions. Moses will have a chance if he has any questions. I was thinking about why people are so hesitant about therapy. There used to be stigmas or what's wrong with you. If we could normalize that, just like if you have a condition, health that's physical, you go to the doctor and you seek help. It's the same thing. There are reasons that there are these professionals who go and get the proper training and titles to be able to do such work. We need to treat it like it's just like going to your regular practitioner, so that you could have healthy mind, body, and soul. It's all connected. And,
it is. And
thank you so much, Mike, for sharing.
And trigger, like, I don't care, and I care because it will create action. If people are triggered, they should be. If they have trauma, they should be triggered so much that they go see help. So there's a culture we live in right now is about trigger warnings and avoiding the bad feelings and avoiding things, but somehow laying it all out on TikTok and Instagram. Like, come on. If you are triggered, that's good, because you might actually seek help.
Yeah, pay attention to that.
There's help. There is help. And if it bothers you, if it resonates with you, good, because it's time. Don't wait till you kill yourself, because there's only, there's one side of each. Like, you don't succeed, you live and you struggle, or you succeed and you leave a disaster behind. Anyway, sorry.
No, but that's powerful.
I'm very passionate about that.
If it affects you,
messaging.
Good. Go get help. All right. Yeah. Moses, thank you for joining us today. Do you have any questions for Mike that you would want to perhaps say now? He doesn't have to. You don't have to. We wanted to give you the chance, since you've been with us listening so closely. What we would like to do is make sure that Kevin gets access to whatever titles you want us to post, the names of your book, your podcast, how to reach you. So this way people can listen, review, find you, hire you, use your expertise in their own personal journey. And I'm sure you're going to touch those million lives. And good luck to you, and let's stay in touch. I can't wait to hear more successes, and your family is so lucky that they have you here, healthy and healed. That is huge. So to be able to say I'm healed, that was what stood out to me the most yesterday when we spoke. You said I am healed, and I was like, there's another side. He's on the other side.
Yeah,
so
there's
awesome.
another side.
Thank you so much, everyone. Join us next week for a surprise guest as well, and share this episode with people that you know. I already have in mind some individuals that I know had similar childhood trauma and can find a lot of value in learning from your experience. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. See you soon.